to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay watching their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
Mother of our firstborn king conceived her first offspring, gave birth in Holy Land to this giant of a man. This is how she played her part by giving us a star. History books will all now show how much to her we owe. Maria. Maria. Sing Hosanna for King. In the highest let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn boy.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
With some frankincense and myrrh, the wise men went to her. They departed their own way, avoiding Herod as they say. Then Mary flee the land to Egypt, child in hand, avoiding Herod all the way, who destroyed children as they play. Maria. Maria. Sing Hosanna for King. In the highest let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn boy. Now the story goes to show the hardship mothers undergo by preserving her firstborn. Her light she also shone, even to the very end. A mother's love she lent, and now all is said and done, gave her only begotten son. Maria. Maria. Sing Hosanna for King. In the highest let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn boy.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
Yeah. Don't forget, it's very important. No matter what you do in this world, we got to remember the firstborn boy. In this time, more than ever, we should give praises and thanks to the man, Most High. Oh, yeah. In the highest, let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn
This is Caribbean Vibes.
Mother of our firstborn king, conceived her first offspring, gave birth in Holy Land to this giant of a man. This is how she played her part by giving us a star. History books will all now show how much to her we owe. Maria. Maria. Sing Hosanna for King. In the highest, let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn boy.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
With some frankincense and myrrh, the wise men went to her. They departed their own way, avoiding Herod as they say. Then Mary flee the land to Egypt, child in hand, avoiding Herod all the way, who destroyed children as they play. Maria. Maria. Sing Hosanna for King. In the highest, let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn boy. Now the story goes to show the hardship mothers undergo by preserving her firstborn. Her light she also shone, even to the very end. A mother's love she lent, and now all is said and done, gave her only begotten son. I, Maria. I, Maria. Sing Hosanna for King. In the highest let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn boy.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
Yeah. Don't forget, it's very important. No matter what you do in this world, we got to remember the firstborn boy. In this time, more than ever, we should give praises and thanks to the man, Most High. Oh, yeah. I, Maria. I, Maria. Sing Hosanna for King. In the highest let us sing. Maria, 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 Maria. He is our Savior. Let's anoint his head with oil and serenade our firstborn boy. That's what we sound. Oh Maria, oh Madre mia, Jesus Christ is born on a Christmas Day, Madre mia. Sing a happy song, para, paramo, para, paramo, para, paramo, para, para. I joined the paraderos, not singing calypso. I sang an aguinaldo. They shouted mucho, mucho. Param, 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 param. That's what we sang. Oh Maria, oh Madre mia, Jesus Christ is born on a Christmas Day, Madre mia. Sing a Christmas song, para, paramo, para, paramo, para, paramo, para, para. Ay, ay, ay. I never forget it. Music. I sang in Hispaniola. They showed me canta, canta. Param, 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 param. That's what we sang. Oh Maria, oh Madre mia, Jesus Christ is born on a Christmas Day, Madre mia. Sing a Christmas song, para, paramo, para, paramo, para, paramo, param, param. Born to us, a child was born. Born to us, an everlasting son. Like a thief in the night, he shone his light. Oh, he meant no harm, came to save us from damnation. Hooray, hooray, hoorah, 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 they say. Our Savior is born today. His running clothes the light, while the shepherds cry. For it just couldn't believe their eyes. And when he come on back, you know they're not Christians. Get together and come nails in the hand. But on the third day, he rose again. So you see, he shed his blood for me.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
A child of joy, a man who bore, and for all sins, the Savior brought and win. See him in the sea, helping the poor, and things like leprosy, you know our Savior cure. Savior is born today. It's running close to light while the shepherds cry. For you just couldn't believe their eyes. And when it come out, man, you know them non-Christians get together and put the hands in their hands. But on the garden, he rose again. So you see, he shed his blood for me. He was conceived, so sad and down, all three in one, a truly blessed son. He displayed his own skill and Father's will. So when we are at fault, we know that he loves us still. Ring, ring, hurrah, 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 they say, our Savior is born today. It's running close to light, while the shepherds cry, for they just couldn't believe the eyes. And when he come on by, you know they're not a Christian. Get together and from the hills in hand. But when we turn there, he rose again. So you see, he shed his blood for me.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
The good book says the time is now. The signs are here, all should kneel and pray. Let the king at the word the master say. The time to start is now, beginning on Christmas Day. Hooray, hooray, hoorah, 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 they say. Our Savior is born today. It's running close to light, while the shepherds cry, for you just couldn't believe the eyes. And when he come on, man, you know they're not Christians. Get together and from the hills in the hand. But on the garden, he rose again. So you see, he shed his blood for me.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
Merry Christmas to
This is Caribbean Vibes.
¿Qué camino cogería si cogióle las desgracias? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? Una mujer me llamaba, pero yo no le entendía. Pero yo no le entendía, pero que él no defendía, a ningún alma nacía. A ningún alma nacía en este puesto parado. Yo vine porque sabía. Yo vine porque sabía cómo se prendió en candela el pueblo de Santa Lucía. ¿Qué camino cogería si cogió la desgracia? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? Una mujer me llamaba, pero yo no la entendía. Pero yo no la entendía, miro que él no la defendía, a ningún alma nacía. A ningún alma nacía, en este puesto parado, yo vine porque sabía. Yo vine porque hacía, el que no sabe de letra no puede dormir cualquiera. Y yo vine porque sabía cómo se prende en candela el pueblo de Santa Lucía. ¡Arriba, arriba! ¡Epa! Mira, la mujer me llamaba y yo no la entendía. No conozco esta esposa. Así es, magnífica. Tiene bastante candela en Santa Lucía. Pues vamos, chicos. ¿Qué camino coger, chico? Allá, apúrate, apúrate, caramba. Vamos.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
¿Qué camino cogería si cogió la desgracia? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? ¿Qué golpe no llevaría? Una mujer me llamaba, pero yo no le entendía. Pero yo no le entendía, miro que él no defendía, en ningún alma nacía. Ningún alma nacía, en este puesto parado, yo vine porque sabía. Yo vine porque sabía, al que no saben de letra no puede dormir confiado. Yo vine porque sabía cómo se prendó en candela el pueblo de Santa Lucía. ¡Upa! ¡Ay, ay! Mira, la mujer llamaba y usted no la entendía. Yo no conoce esto. ¿Qué pasó? Así es. Magnífica. Tiene bastante candela en Santa Lucía. Ay, carajo. Nos vamos, pues. Que camina por el chico. ¿Usted quiere va para la Santa Lucía? Así es. Así.
The Ground Report with Mikey K, Andy Williams, and Lennox Smith.
Vamos. Entrando la sala de recibimiento y yo le cantaré cerca del nacimiento. Entrando la sala de recibimiento y yo le cantaré cerca del nacimiento.
Alegría, alegría, sensación el Señor, para salvar al hombre, quizás su redentor. Entregue una a la Virgen María, desde los el niño, la iglesia.
En la noche cuento, dulce resplandor, es la gran estrella que anuncia el Señor. En la noche buena, dulce resplandor, es la gran estrella que anuncia el Señor.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
Alegría, alegría, sensación el Señor, para salvar al hombre, quizás su redentor. Entregue una a la Virgen María, desde el niño, la iglesia.
En el comedero de aquel ganado, María parió el Dios soberano. En el comedero aquel ganado, María parió el Dios soberano.
Alegría, alegría, se nació el Señor, para salvar al hombre, quizás su redentor. Entregue una a la Virgen María, desde el niño, la iglesia.
The Ground Report with Mikey K, Andy Williams, and Lennox Smith.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Of course, we are here as per usual. What? Yes, indeed. Of course, today already being the 10th of December. Let me just check that to be sure. Yeah, the 10th of December. Wow. So the year is rapidly drawing to a close. Of course, New Year's wishes and greetings are in abundance, I'm sure, moving forward, particularly in the post-Christmas season. But immediately, and I'm sure that in some instances, people may not be focusing at all on Christmas, but on Carnival, which is, of course, a stationary delicacy on the cultural agenda and calendar of Trinidad and Tobago. But that being as it may, a pleasant good morning to all and sundry, east, west, north, south, central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are streaming on the World Wide Web, a pleasant good day to you. Yes, Andy will be joining us momentarily. There are some behind-the-scenes issues that has to be resolved, and only he can do that. But that does not mean that the show will not go on. Of course, he is the man that will go into the nitty-gritty or the details of individual, let's say, greetings extended to members of the audience, whether you are listening, whether you are viewing, or a combination of both. But the fact of the matter is that the ground report is here. I want to thank, of course, all those persons who yesterday was very complimentary in terms of the presentation made during the course of the program yesterday with respect to putting up the maps between Trinidad and Tobago, the position of Monas Island, and so on. They said that a couple of them said that they were very grateful to see a visual proximity of both countries for the first time. They have witnessed on a map how close Trinidad is to Venezuela and vice versa. And of course, some of the villages that will be facing Trinidad and how easy it would be to get to Trinidad and Trinidad to get to Venezuela. Well, fortunately for us, because of language and other historical barriers, the movement is almost one way, meaning from Venezuela to Trinidad, but not necessarily from Trinidad to Venezuela. Except, of course, in one time I remember an aunt of mine's coming back to Trinidad annually, and of course seeing how great Venezuela was. But I suppose those were the times before Chavez and others. But that being as it may, the fact of the matter is that the current situation, the contemporary times, and the relationship means that there is a greater flow of traffic between Trinidad and Venezuela, but coming from Venezuela to Trinidad, as opposed to any kind of reciprocity for obvious reasons, particularly in these times. So let me say once again, of course, we thank those persons who took the time to really commend us, because they must have seen it would have been the use of technology and, of course, the tremendous work to have a topic, and as we are speaking about the topic, to, of course, gather from various sources the maps, the information, and utilize the technology in such a way so as to make it real to people. So much so that I think what has happened here is that the trust reposed in the ground report has now, of course, probably doubled, if not tripled, in such circumstance. And we are very pleased to bring it to you. Nobody else has been able to do it like that. Talk about traditional media, non-traditional media, and anywhere else except us in the space of 3 hours, which we have with you on a daily basis, except of course for weekends on the ground report. So once again, I want to thank, of course, all of those persons who really appreciated the length to which we had to go in order to certify and to bring as practical as possible and as real as possible, beyond the studio, beyond, of course, the talk, what is going on the ground physically between Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, it was as a consequence of that kidnapping episode. Of course, in terms of the headlines, well, the Prime Minister said that is very suspicious. She's very, I want to paraphrase it by saying concerned about the fact that here it is, as we mentioned as well yesterday, that kind of money, very difficult to comprehend, and that, of course, it would have been from some country outside of Trinidad because the demand was in US. And of course, it brought me back one time to the issue of the excuse that Stuart Young made with respect to changing the $100 bills, Trinidad $100 bills, from, of course, the cut note to the polymer note, which is what we use today and right now. And the exercise was very simple, and the explanation was very built into it was some degree of ludicrousness and laughability, because here it is. The excuse that they made was that people were laundering the $100 bills, the Trinidad and Tobago $100 bills, the cut notes, and at the same time was the denomination of choice for drug runners. Imagine that. Our blue note was the preferred denomination in terms of the dollar and the value to drug runners. And we alone could have done it. We said, all right, if what you are saying is so, that apart from the laundering and apart from the dollar being the medium of exchange for drugs from South America, whether it's Venezuela, Colombia, etc., then we invited Stuart Young to go on a sting operation to catch some kind of drug mule in the Gulf of Paria. So set up a sting operation, that is what the police calls it, and then load up a pirogue with stacks of Trinidad and Tobago blue notes, $100 bills, since that is the currency of choice. And then, of course, order a shipment of cocaine from whatever source, and agree to meet up in the Gulf of Paria. And of course, to cut a long story short, we went on to say that, listen, when they hand over the drugs, you start to hand them stacks and piles of blue dollar notes. Trinidad and Tobago $100 bill. Since is the currency of choice for these people. And of course, the conclusion was, see if they wouldn't end up like a strainer at the bottom of the Gulf of Paria. And of course, at the time, some people said, if that would have occurred, it would have been happy good riddance. Happy good riddance. Because it's asinine, it's stupid, it is foolish. And we see that kind of what I consider to be phantasmagorical, foolish stories still is able to be produced in the minds of these people, and of course project it onto the population, so they believe, as if we are fools. I told you about, of course, the whole question of him's birth. And they're trying to tell us three things that points to you one time with him birth. Even though he projects and he made some parliamentarians believe that somehow he's some kind of intellect and he's a smart, experienced fella. But about 3 or 4 things happened in the parliament and outside of the parliament that demonstrates that the opposite is the case. And that he is stereotypical of how Rowley is and how the others are. Huff and puff, blowing and making plenty noise, empty vessels. But at the end of the day, it's about theatrics and tomfoolery and creating illusions and delusions, innuendos, misinformation, disinformation, as part clearly of the PNM propaganda machinery to get into office and stay in office and then do us all kind of harm, pain, and agony would have descended on the population. We are very, very, very familiar, all of us. Otherwise, if that wasn't so, then you would not have resort to tear gas on ordinary people. If it wasn't so, you would not have resorted to 34 or so persons being charged, arrested and charged, protesting the government's misconduct and unholy presence in the corridors of power and the abuse and their inability to translate the goodwill of the people that was reposed in them, albeit that it would have been, comparatively speaking, the ratio of victory, in other words, just 23 in the first instance in 2015 and in 2020, just 22, there was further reduced. But yet still, they will act even that in itself, that action to suggest that somehow they got a serious mandate. The way they acted, you could have sworn that they got about 26 seats as the UNC and coalition of interest accomplished on the 28th of April. You can swear the way how they start to act. No regard, of course, for that fact that the people are doubtful, that the people are skeptical, that the people don't trust you. But yet still, Rowley and Innsbruck and, of course, Diaz, Singh and Brown and them and make it look as though the population, of course, is in sync with the illusion and delusion they project onto the population to make themselves look as what they are not. So Innsbruck, of course, is recent iteration of that nonsensicality and that intellectual, cerebral decline that seemed to be collective and it seems to be a disease among them. When he tried to tell us that, of course, the landlord tax is similar to that of the what? And try to make it look worse than that of the property tax. You know, I say that Imber tried to make us believe that the landlord levy or surcharge is similar to the property tax. Yes, very recently. So much so, of course, that the Honorable Minister of Finance, Dave Tanku, had to make a statement to repel, rebuke, resist, and rubbish that square peg and wrong hole logic that is necessary in the level of nonsensicality and irrationality that only the very gullible and the very sycophantic in the name of some elusive PNM that is really a criminal enterprise would accept. Not even a fifth standard child or even lower would see that as making sense, what he would have said. That is the level at which they were always at and have continued to descend to. So, what is the reality? The reality is that all property tax could be considered as part and parcel of the landlord tax, but not all landlord tax could be considered property tax. Let me repeat. All property tax in the context of landlord tax. So landlord tax will be, or put another way, let me be very, very, very clear. All landlord tax is not property tax. And all property tax, again, is not landlord tax. And all landlord tax is not property tax. All landlord tax is not property tax. In other words, whether you are a landlord or non-landlord, the property tax would have applied to you once you occupy some building or you are deemed to be in possession thereof, and therefore, as for the purposes of that tax, you have control, and therefore you are in charge, and therefore property tax will be applied to you. In the present circumstance, is only if you have property, and more so, property that you actually rent and you have a receipt for, and not the amorphous or the abstract or the assumption that every piece of property in the country, as the property tax would have suggested, you put a makeup, an illusion, concocted tax or value on that relating to what they call rental value. Let us get it clear again. All landlord taxes are not property tax. And all property tax are not landlord tax. Let's get it clear. And therefore, and even when you look at the framework and the landlord surcharge, as it is called, you would see that only those who are actually receiving rental on of their properties are the ones that will have to pay that landlord tax. In other words, those who do not have their properties assigned to that activity, commercial activity, and I'm sure for those that may be doing it for subsistence, I'm sure that there is room to make an application and to make an argument for the discretion of the authorities to, of course, because I cannot see that if I am renting an apartment, for example, and that is providing the income to me, having regard, of course, to the minimum, I suppose there must be a minimum. And that's another thing with the property tax, that even if you have or occupy a property that is valued less than $14,000, because that's the minimum threshold, 14,000. They put it at that. If it value less than that, when you feel you get away, you have to pay across the board the $500. Yeah, you have to pay $500. So no one escapes once you occupy property. In the case of the landlord tax, only people who are renting from you or from that person. And therefore, whilst it's a new, very, what I consider to be well-targeted, intended, of course, clearly to target a specific group of persons who would have been out of the tax net, so to speak, that has been able, and I understand the harshness of the penalty, because clearly it was designed, or it is designed, to make certain that people do not try to evade, do not try to avoid. That's what that, it could only be that. And the same way for the increase in fines relating to traffic offenses, it makes a person wonder whether the nail in the coffin will work more than the coffin. So that's the philosophy. That's how I'm seeing it. And while on the face of it, it may sound harsh, but on the other hand, as we know, if the penalty is light, a fella tell you, well, listen, I could use obscene language wherever, because I just go in and I go pay $100 or $200. The magistrate, that's the maximum the magistrate could charge or punish me with under the relevant law. So that's the attitude. So if the penalty is high, however, there is less likelihood that people will take the risk, and therefore will find ways and means to conform. Because if you are caught, that is the outcome. I'll give you an example. Recently, one of my vehicles was not yet inspected. And it so happens, going to Diego Martin, free and minding nobody else's business but my own licensing officers in the roadway. They check in on vehicles, and they asked me to pull aside. Obviously, the first thing, they didn't see any sticker on the windscreen. So one would expect that if your vehicle is licensed for the year, is inspected for the year, sorry, you would have a sticker on it. I didn't have any. I could have made all kinds of excuses. I could have said that the screen just broke yesterday or the day before, and we just take it and it's on it, and then they go ask me, well, God bring it, etc. So I didn't want to go through that. So I simply said that no, since I bought it, I'm doing some work on it, and it's some time yet, but money difficult to get. So when the license officer checked January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, he said 7 months. And of course, he issued the ticket to me $1,000. I look for that. Right? So the point I'm making is that if you take the risk and they catch up with you, the authorities, well, you pay the price. Just as how I have to. And don't tell me that I'm joking, let me just produce the ticket for you so that you'll understand. Those electronic tickets, I happen to have it here. I'm working with it because I intend to pay the fine. I ain't getting money yet, but I intend to pay the fine. I'm not going to contest it, because how you contested that? So here is it, right? So I got a recent one here. Yeah. I don't know if you can see it plainly, but this is how it is. It's generated electronically by a mobile device that the officers would have had with them for these kinds of offenses. Right? So it is called Republic of Trinidad and Tobago Fixed Penalty Notice, Motor Vehicle Road and Traffic Road Traffic Act, chapter 4850. And of course, it is due to me, Lennox Smith, the driver. And of course, what it says now, it says that I have infringed, of course, not having produced an inspection certificate for the vehicle that I was driving, and of course, fixed penalty $1,000. Yeah, because I am at pains to make that point, because I've had one or two persons calling me and saying, "Well, listen, the tax or the surcharge on rental premises too tough." And of course, there are excuses where people would use certain excuses, and some of which are valid. And I'm saying that there must be some kind of accommodation to give a hearing to such persons who may have a very valid reason why they should not be caught in that net. But they have to, of course, advance it. They cannot just say, "I'll take the chance," and if the chance turn out to have materialized, that they pay the price, and the price is pretty heavy. Right? So I think you should be exploring what options you have, because if you do, you're damned. If you don't do, you're more damned. So please conform, and of course, then complain. And of course, while you're conforming, you could complain as well. Right? So I just thought I would use that as a personal iteration, as a personal example, as to the fact that, whilst it may be, I could, of course, say that within the specific period, say that I am contesting it, and then, of course, go to the courts and ask for leniency on the basis of impecuniarity, meaning that I don't have money, I'm not working, I don't have a job that brings a regular salary per se. But I'm not going to do that on this occasion. I know that there are people who would listen and say, "Well, listen, let me help Paul Smith, because beyond that, he's doing human service, etc." Depending on your perspective and whether you have, of course, any extra money lying around to, of course, assist. But this is not about asking for any assistance. I want to tell you that. But if you're so inclined, I will be welcome. I will welcome it. Of course, my specific request, of course, will be for those hampers, that hamper drive that we have. You could take the number that is coming across the screen, 3376940. Call Annie at the other number, 3366594. You can do that. And of course, we have a massive hamper Christmas Day. I feel extremely satisfied and gratified on Christmas morning to be delivering hampers to give a cheer and smile to entire families. This year we have not asked for toys, we asked for food, and as I mentioned yesterday, I think the government is of the same view. Prefer to provide their employees probably with a hamper or two, as opposed to a party or two, or here and there. And I suppose as a government, they will want to give toys as well, because they don't want, of course, to be branded as Mr. or Mrs. Scrooge, yes, Ebenezer Scrooge, right? The man who, of course, hates Christmas. So, as the story would have gone. So that is the essence of the asinineness of Imsbert. But the other one, I think, is even more scintillating and much more poignant. And that is when he tried to make an excuse for Penelope Beckles having, of course, presented the citation of a private members' day bill that she presented, calling on the government to recommit itself, calling or reaffirm to good neighborly relations, and indeed, of course, a foreign policy that would, of course, fall in line, and this is my interpretation, with what the PNM perceive to be a good foreign policy. And you know, once the PNM perceives something to be good, you know it is never good. It's always the opposite. We saw that, and the term of the PNM was replete with these kinds of what I consider to be contradictions. Saying it's for the people, but really and truly is for themselves, or it turns out to be the detriment. A classic example, of course, is when they said that, listen, we are reducing the subsidies, which would mean that gas prices will rise, but we are also opening up the market to the vicissitudes of what is called the ebb and flow of demand and supply, a basic economic principle, supply and demand, so that if the demand is high, prices rise, and if supply is low or weak, but there is an increase in demand, then prices, of course, will naturally rise. And therefore, that intermixing or intermingling of supply and demand economics, one expect that the consumer to benefit from that. So if the prices is high, then of course the demand, you have to pay the price. So, even though the demand may be inelastic, as in the case of fuel. And if the prices are low, one expects that the consumer, when they go to the pump, will get that benefit. Well, it was never so. Never so. Prices always rise, but we never saw, even though we had instances where prices would have fallen, particularly in and around COVID time. But prices never fell. But they gave us that, and of course they boasted and say that we in riot yet and all of that. So we know that they are the consummate and the quintessential conflict and contradiction. We know that. So he goes to the parliament and defending Penelope Beckles, who at the end of her citation then says, I beg to move. Without, of course, giving some meat on that bone that she would have, that verbal bone that she would have, of course, presented to the parliament. What makes it even more inexcusable is that she's a seasoned politician. She's not Roger Alexander, who seemed to be finding his way now. But here it is. She is a seasoned politician, seasoned parliamentarian, goes to the parliament, presents, of course, her resolution. The citation, of course, having been completed, she then says, well, listen, I beg to move. Well, she wasn't spared by a very alert government that says, listen, no, she has already said, I don't expect her to go and elaborate, put some meat on that bone, so to speak. No one expects that at that stage when you would have said that you beg to move. So the alert government said, no, she can't come back. There is no coming back. There is no amendment or adjustments. There are no compromise. And on their insistence, the speaker eventually said, well, listen, I'm sorry, Penelope Beckles, but that is the rule. I have no discretion in this matter. And therefore you have lost the chance of putting some meat and therefore substantiating the basic argument that you would have presented in your resolution, which of course, as most of you would know, really comprised of whereas and whereas and whereas this and that and whereas this and that. And of course, and at the end of it, yeah, be it resolved, so and so and so. Well, that she reached there and she didn't put any meat, any furtherance of that. So Imsworth stands up in the parliament and says, listen, according to, I think, Standard Order 41, she's entitled she was entitled, of course, to continue. But in making that case, he cited 41, which talks about, of course, making adjustments to the substantive resolution or the substantive as presented by Penalty Beckles in this case of the citation, which she failed to put some meat on in the process. So he was saying that. I say that nobody, because it was Bunilal who stood up and said, listen, in essence, he reversed what she was trying to present in the resolution. In other words, he was saying, listen, I want to make amendments to say that this House accept and agree that the government has done well, has continued, of course, to observe good neighborly relations, etc., etc. Totally contradictory to what Penalty Beckles, the leader of the opposition, wanted, of course, to advance in the House in her resolution. And it was stood up and said, well, no, you cannot, it's only the mover of the resolution could make an amendment. In other words, telling Dr. Munilal, a seasoned campaigner as well, that listen, no, you have no locus standi in that matter. You have no legal authority to amend the resolution as presented by Penelope Beckles. Well, the speaker, a good lawyer that he is, and very astute as well, he said, no, you read A, but you didn't read B and C, which also says in that very standing order, said that anybody, any member could also propose amendments. And he had to shut his trap. That was another faux pas to show how, no matter how long them fellas, that is, to me, is rudimentary. Why would you stand up and try to hoodwink the population in that way? And in the process, embarrass yourself, the party, and everybody else, and the parliament, and your longevity as a parliamentarian in the parliament. So, so they had to accept the fact. And of course, at the same time, shows up the efficaciousness and the alertness of the government, even in the not the precincts, but in the chamber of the parliament, when, of course, serious matters of a legislative nature is being debated and discussed, because parliament, as you know, comes from the French term parler, the verb parler. Parler means to talk. So it has evolved over the years, and therefore we have adopted, of course, what is called the Westminster system, where we have a bicameral parliament, meaning that it is split into two. We have an upper house, which is called the Senate, and of course the lower house called the House of Representatives. Yes, it is. But inside of there are rules that would have been made by among them being part of the legislature, and therefore part of the four arms of government. As you know, the four arms of government will be that of the executive, those who get to manage the affairs of the country by way of an election. No other way. Abu Bakr and their attempt was an aberration and a stain on our democracy. But that's another story. But the fact is that they could only get to manage the affairs of the country by an election. And what does that mean? It means that you and I would decide whether or not they are suitable to, of course, manage the affairs from what would have been offered as persons who are willing to serve for and on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore the people of Trinidad and Tobago, in their best interest. And then, of course, so you have the executive, you have the legislature, which, of course, is what I was referring to in terms of Imsbert making a fool of himself as an experienced parliamentarian. And then, of course, you have as well what we call the judiciary, interpreting the laws and saying who is right and who is wrong, sometimes getting it wrong and have to go further afield up to the Privy Council, our apex court, to, of course, make certain decisions that may be up to the point of the appeal court in Trinidad be skeptical, be in doubt, and therefore people will go further to get a final decision on the matter. But of course, we have a fourth one, which is the fourth estate, which is people like us. When I see you on the chats, I don't see you as ordinary people, because you choose to be there. You choose to listen to us every day for 3 hours. And therefore, you are part and parcel of what is called the fourth estate, which, of course, is the media. And when you make your comment, you are really, in effect, even though you don't know, you are influencing what is called public opinion. Public opinion. You are fashioning people's views on matters. This person you are hearing in the background since morning, and I warned her and told her that between 6 and 9, and you see the time now is what? It just is after 7 minutes to 8, and she's calling every minute when she knows that I'm supposed to be on air. We have to be disciplined, man. Calling every minute. You heard her about 4 times. I had to struggle to take off. Why would you do that? Why? And these are the simple things that I really and truly commend the people like Andy for being very, very accommodating and tolerant of, and even myself. Because I had to 3-4 times. I was minded to shut down the phone, but in doing so, I may lose important calls in that melee. So I prefer to, deal with it with the agony and pain that I have to go through. Look, you hear it again? The same person. Let me tell her on air. Hello, yes, listen, I keep saying that between 6 and 9 o'clock, I will not be available because we are on air. You know that. So that is why you don't see me on air. Well, I'm on air right now. On TV, on YouTube, on Facebook, and just now, I believe we will be on the. You still want to ask me a question after I tell you that? Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead. Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Right. Okay. Call me after 9 tomorrow, and we will deal with that. If it's a hamper you want, listen, I just told you asked for a hamper. You said that you weren't able to get it from social development because we had here because you're already getting pension. I just told you, call me after 9 o'clock tomorrow, and we will work out something. Let me put it this way, there is a possibility. Okay? All right. Okay, then. Bye-bye. Yeah. So I don't expect any more calls today. All right. You see, I have to go through all of that. So I'm just showing you how difficult our work is. Challenging. And with no compensatory financial resources. Some people say, Smith, Andy, Mikey, how will I make that, boy? 10 years. Well, of course, a good heart, commitment, dedication, and with the will of, and in the belief of somebody that is much more mightier than us, knowing full well the tasks that we have given to ourselves. That is why. So their Innsbruck was like the cheese standing alone, and of course, having a presentation equivalent to a neophyte. And I must say as well, a simpleton, a foolish person. Yeah, simpleton. I don't think there's any better description for such a so-called experience in terms of length of time, and of course would want to defend the indefensible. So as far as Penny is concerned, she ought to have known and therefore had to suffer the consequences. Of course, the resolution failed, and she knew that it would have failed because, of course, you have a massive mandate and therefore a massive number in favor of the government in the House, and therefore it was just a matter of time. Whether she was able to complete or not was irrelevant. She would have failed because the intention was to embarrass the government, and no government, of course, would want that, particularly when the arguments are so nebulous, are so tenuous, and as well as, of course, very emaciated. Yeah, makes no sense. But they do it to get public relations attention and all of that. We understand that that's part of the cause for the politics. But of course, you can't be so ridiculous that people see you as a fool or they see you as unproductive and not contributory to national development. So, of course, the fireworks bill was passed yesterday. Fireworks bill was passed. Let me take this call, people. Let me take the calls. Yes. Good morning. I'm on air now. Yes. Tell me. Hello. All right. So, but that person is stunned. All right. So these are very important issues that we need to understand. Who you must repose your trust and the management of the country, whose hands it must be placed. And that is an issue not just for an election, because there's another one coming up in Tobago, but it must be a daily exercise to firmly, when the time comes for the manifestation of who should manage the affairs of the country, you must have no doubt. It must be so indelibly implanted and very difficult to extricate, to amputate, or to get rid of, because you are firm having regard to what you would have experienced and see. So I want to thank, of course, those persons who go online every morning and, of course, chat with each other. You are an influencer. And let's hope, as we have been attempting to do, we do so with a certain amount of decorum, a certain amount of pride, a certain amount of integrity, and the tomfoolery and the unnecessaries ad nauseum is really and truly counterproductive and does not contribute to the advancement. Yes, we can make a joke or two. Yes, nothing wrong with that. But within the context of understanding that as human beings, one to another, and in a society where the human being, of course, is seen as a colony of ants or bees, as the case may be, higher behind, meaning that they are gregarious animals, they live in groups, and therefore that is why you have the term sociology, and we have to have relationships. We must do so knowing full well that we are contributing to what? To national development, even though we may be individuals and be seen as insignificant, having regard to the fact that you are one or we are one in what? In 1.5 million people. You must be able to work towards the national agenda, and there will be times when we on this program, particularly if when we go to the other place. And don't forget, on the 5th of January, We will be at the 91.1 Talk City and on television station 4, TV4, to bring these and other issues, but to a wider audience, some of whom we have been yearning to reconnect with. So you get a chance, whether in the maxis, whether you're in taxis, whether you are one that prefer or have only access to the radio because it is much more, it's cheaper and more convenient. And indeed, the difficulty with smartphones and having to have, of course, your television and the cost associated with having to have internet, etc. We understand. And I want to tell you that the commendations and the accolades and the respect that are being shown to Andy Williams in particular, I want to single him out. Andy Williams and his natural inclination for fairness, for equity, for integrity, not just in daily operations at the common Joe level, at the ordinary person's level, but at the level of government and governance. Today, he is listened to, not just here in Trinidad. I had cause, and maybe I'd show you a copy of it. I had cause to write to the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, Mr. Friday, Honorable Friday in St. Vincent, thanking, of course, the people in general for their hospitality when we were there. He stayed longer than I did. But the fact of the matter is that we were able to win new friends. We were able to make an impact. We were able to carry the philosophy, the ideology, and the operations of the ground report into that civilization or that society or that country, whichever you want to use. And just as in Tobago, having been separated, Trinidad and Tobago by water, we had to cross the seas in order to influence the last THA elections. We played our part in St. Vincent as well. So much so that he was compelled, and with limited resources, we agreed that only one person could stay until the night of the calling of the results of the elections. So I had to return and anchor here, whilst of course he stayed there. And as you saw, our prediction came through. Our prediction came. So we told the Prime Minister in a letter yesterday. It was sent by airmail to him, but of course we did email. We didn't email him. We WhatsApp him the text of our letter to him, congratulating him, and of course, and at the same time thanking him for the accommodation and the hospitality of the people, and of course for whom he has total and absolute and legal responsibility, now being elected as Prime Minister. And of course there are other new things that we have put in it to sort of maintain the relationship. So at the appropriate time, I'm sure Andy will be able to, of course, share that with you. But I don't think it's by place to say that, because it's more of one that ought not at this point in time to be shared with the general public. So the point I am making is that a fellow like Andy, I ain't blowing my own trumpet. He asked me to say this. He don't even know I would use this opportunity to say so. But you have to give credit to the man. Having moved from strength to strength, having moved from maybe a rusty, if I have to make a comparison, a rusty, insignificant piece of metal that when polished with the appropriate application, chemical and otherwise, turn out to be a massive piece of gold. And that is what he is. He suffered, of course, the indignities of many. He suffered the humiliation of even of those who ought to have known better. I was there, I saw, I witnessed. So I can tell you, and still continue so to do. Of course, I think that the most defining moment that will generate in anybody's mind a course of action to say, I'm done with this thing because it is affecting my health. No, I'm talking about the recent bout of health issues that caused him to be off air for a little while. No, I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about what essentially generated it. They tried to kill him. That is what I'm talking about. They tried to kill him. And most persons will say, I'm done with that because it's this thing. Defending, of course, a particular cause would mean my life is threatened. Then I go on. But he didn't. So apart from, of course, not being raw in terms of his journalistic etiquette and presence and articulation, that physical attack that damaged his health even to today, and yet still is able to gather friends and to influence, I would say, millions in the region, at home, and across the globe, whether they're listening to us right now in parts of Europe, Africa, and other parts of the Caribbean. He's been able to do that. And I have a message in that for the young people across the board. I'm segregating now. There will be a time when we will segregate those in school as opposed to those out of school, those who are in gangs as opposed to those who are not in gangs, those who are still at home and listening to the parents as opposed to those who may be in the process of believing that they have come of age and therefore their independence must be consolidated and solidified by being disrespectful to those who would have nurtured you. And especially, of course, and I can't help it, places like Laventille, Morvant, Silats, Beetham, the Diego Martins, and along the East-West Corridor and fast and deep south, Point 14, Gun Hill, places like these. You have a duty and responsibility to look at examples like these and say no. Say no. If he can go through all of that and still committed to that cause of transformation, of believing Trinidad and Tobago ought to be the Singapore long time ago of the West, and the Dubai of the West, and continues to contribute, then we have to take a second look if you do not yet have a fixation as to invoking your ability to emulate, to be like Andy and what he stands for and what he has been expressing on a daily basis to the people of Trinidad and to it matters not, because many of those persons who have degrees, whether they are in government, out of government, intending, of course, to advance themselves because they have and would have gone to universities, etc., and have a university education, so to speak. They're wishing they could be Andy. Them too. I know. I have spoken. Some have communicated. I remember in Andy's yard. I'm not going to call his name, but I doubt he would be offended if I do. Maybe I'll call his name just to make certain that we understand what we are what I am talking about and what I'm projecting here with respect, of course, to a fellow like Andy. In his yard, based on a conversation that he would have had with Justice Lockie, the father of course, the appeal court judge that was a former politician. Yes, I'm sure that he wouldn't mind, because he said that he wanted to meet with us, and whatever advice he can give, he will make himself available. So I think that is the consummate, that is the creme de la creme, and therefore the quintessential exemplification of persons who would have made it academically and otherwise, and have their position in society, but still look at an ordinary fellow like Andy coming from almost nowhere, and then, of course, talking to millions and influencing, of course, people all over the globe. So Andy picks up the phone and calls Justice Lockie. Of course, he was a former judge, I think, at the ICC, the International Criminal Court as well. I think he just came back, because in the conversation, that is what he told us. And he picked it up. And of course, telephone, and then I introduced myself, and he introduced himself. And then he said, "Keep it up. Keep it up." He said, "And while I cannot come to the fore, people like you are needed in this country." Yes, that's Justice Lockie said that. The father of the present appeal court judge told us that. And I took that to mean that he sees in us, maybe at times, things that we have not seen in ourselves. And of course, the focus here is on Andy. Because while, of course, I could have gone on, having lectured, of course, in the American University, and traveled, of course, as far as academic things are concerned, every year, of course, the Inter-American Development Bank will send me a letter inviting me, of course, to their pre-meeting sessions in whatever part of the globe. I went, of course, to Colombia at one time, and then Barbados, etc. Andy didn't have that level of exposure. No. He just had raw and unadulterated local bread, common sense, and beyond. And here it is, a man like Lockie is saying, Justice Lockie is saying, "Keep it up. You all are doing fine." And what was significant for me is that he is saying that I can't do it. In other words, he see in Andy what he would have liked to be, but could not. That is what is critical. Understand what we are dealing with. And so when people like that give you an endorsement, you cannot help but be motivated. Of course, he said certain things of a motivational nature to myself, of course. Being, as he put it, and that's the sense I got, being honored to have received a phone call from two what he considered to be distinguished persons, even though he himself, one will have to consider to be on a sociological and recognition basis. I mean, miles ahead of us, having achieved, of course, what he has achieved in the jurisprudence field. Yeah. I am saying all of this, people, to say that when we get to the next place, 91.1, and when we get on Channel 4 television, it must be a horse of a different color. Not that the ethos of the purpose, the building blocks of that developmental trajectory that we have set for ourselves, it may well be divine intervention, I don't know. But I can tell you, some people say, Smith, you get licks with a Laventille stick. Up to the other day, a man telling me, use Lennox Smith. I say, yes, in person. And then he says, okay, yeah, boy, Laventille for Laventille, yes. And Andy and Mikey will tell you that how much arguments we would have had since, Lennox, forget them people now. You know, the argument was because they go kill you. Of course, in my interest was not to, in any way, to sully the abject needs of the area, which of course I have chosen to serve. But it was more about my health, my material development. I know Heinz said that I'm doing this to get rich. I know big house. I know big time car. Of course, I am saturated with contentment. Not like them. They want to be, of course. And if that is their forte, fine. But do not weigh me as if I am a greedy, voracious, avarice like them, by utilizing their positions to facilitate that. I do the opposite. As I said yesterday, you know, if I had the money, none of them fellas and them will go, and I'll try to make an intervention to prevent them from going and snatching somebody's purse and the ring, and I will give them it. There are some visions that I would have had that I will tell you in sometime in the future. I thought it was important, of course, to engage in this discussion tonight, today. Andy, as I said, is a bit indisposed at the moment, but it is critical. And I want to tell you as well that there were times when there was a universal feeling among us to give up, to give in. And it was Andy. Sometimes, of course, prodded on by yours truly. And I would say no, and he will accept. I'd say, let's continue. And it is not by accident you would have seen from time to time, because he would have been the most recalcitrant, meaning that the one who would be given the most resistance to continuing in spite of the apparent neglect, in spite of the lack of rewards, material and otherwise, and financial, in spite of all of that. You would have seen it reflected by the conspicuousness of his absence. I'm talking about Michael Kerr. But we had to tell him, hold on. We had to tell him the race is not for the swiftest. As we saw after the 28th of April board appointments here, board appointments there, of course, ministers here, ministers there, etc., etc. And you too would have observed, and we did not quiver, at least publicly, we did not quiver. And this does not mean that we are quivering. All I'm saying is that it is a reality and an observation that we need to share with the population, the listenership, to be as honest as possible as we travel farther afield. And so, yes, we are only human. And of course, you have the avalanche in the process of persons who either they don't know or they ought to know, or wishing something inimical. They then say, well, Smith, you ain't get nothing, Andy, you ain't get nothing, Mikey, you ain't get nothing, and that has its toll. Especially in circumstances where we, the trio, knew the discussions that took place with those who would be vying for governance and has achieved that objective at this time. Yes, we would have had discussions. We are not fools. And therefore, expectations would have been. So when others were saying, well, not among us, we were saying, and I in particular was very vociferous and very insistent, that we must be brought to the dinner table at some point in time. Must. Of course, there's a limit to that shelf life and of that expectation. Let me repeat that. There's a limit to that, to the shelf life, to that expectation. Because you can't tell me a year going and you are yet to be submissive and very, of course, contrite. Contrite here is an appropriate word. Unless you're feeling sorry for yourself. All right, okay, let's say contrite. But I really want to say docile. Docile. And we heard all of the arguments out there, especially, of course, those persons who would have been, of course, in the PNM camp and, of course, sympathetic to the PNM. You know what they were saying, that nothing for them. Look, these African guys, watch, look what has happened to them. And we among us say, no, it's impossible to have done all of that and not to be considered. And I went further, as is my position, even at this point in time, promoting and, of course, making certain that Mikey and Andy get their just due. I went further to say I am willing Hey, madam, I just spoke to you. No, you can't ask my question now, right? Just after 9 o'clock. Okay. They get you angry. I just spoke to her. But that's how it is at times. Right. So, I'm saying that the just due and my position has been fundamentally, as I said in the campaign, I am prepared to work for free for this government. Let me repeat. I said I am prepared to work for free for and with this government. Because I'm satisfied that to take Trinidad and Tobago forward, and the fact that wealth and prosperity will be garnered, and the augmentation thereof will be such that there will be no need for me to suffer the consequences of not being materially or monetarily sustained, because it will have enough for all to frolic in, if you want to call it that. Yeah. To absorb, to partake, to benefit. Have enough. But it will take building blocks of time, strategy, ideas, and I am satisfied that that is the direction in which we are going. The temporary setback with respect, of course, to the closure of CPEP and URP and the forestry and so on, I understand the impact. There could be none more accurate, more aware, much more acutely conscious of the impact. But the capitalization of it for political fodder or currency is the domain of the PNM. The PNM will see that as a major fillip for whatever illusionary comeback that they would want to engage in and capitalize. But as I have always said, evil cannot prevail over good. And when you spit in the sky, it falls in your face. If you are opposite the descent, exactly opposite the descent of that spit or that sputum, yeah, or that saliva, whichever you want to call it. Yeah. So, what we are saying here is that the PNM will capitalize on that, hoping that their political stocks will improve there, and we understand that. But the reason why I am prepared to work for free, and I could have said the same thing about the PNM, but they have displayed a behavior and characterization and characteristics that is inimical not only to the people that I care about, but to the national environment. They have betrayed. Their perfidiousness is as elastic and as unlimited as a 360 degrees circle. Can't know the beginning, they can't know the end. Round and round and round. That's what the PNM is all about. And when you look at the abuse that they perpetrated on their, what I consider to be very vital, is like a heart, lungs, maybe, lungs and liver and intestine, way that way, vital organs. I talk about the Laventils and the level of abuse and the level of conmanship and the level of misinformation, disinformation, and psychological, what I consider to be brainwashing. How the hell you could love something that don't love you or don't care about you? So it has to be brainwashing. And I came to that realization when we look at, of course, those persons who are considered to be fundamentalists in whatever religion. Then, of course, the classic examples we have these days I say, because history is replete with, of course, fundamentalists, even in the Christian sphere, in the Christian community as well. When we had, of course, the conquistadors coming here in the Caribbean after the rediscovery by Columbus, and they came here and they want to Christianize the domestic population and see them as Satan, and etc., etc. And today, Same thing. Nothing has changed. That they saw their religion as superior. And they engage in all kinds of acts to inculcate, to brainwash, to deceive. I'm still on there. Yeah, to deceive. And that is what they did to the Laventil people, Diego Martin people, Point Fortin and Labre people, and up the corridor people. Yeah, that's what they did. And that's what they continue to do, because it is said that a person who does the same thing over and over and expect a different result is either a fool or they gone mad. But there is an addendum to that cliche, that saying, that quote, which is not just a person who does the same thing over and over and expect a different result is a fool or a mad person, not just that. But there can be no more dangerous individual or group of individuals or institutions that is doing wrong and then projecting it as if they are doing right. That is the PNL. Doing wrong, but projecting it as if they are doing right. And in the process, of course, as I said, the indoctrination concept comes in, the brainwashing comes in, the concept of ideological disposition comes in. Why do you think they would say things like, if you have a flag, sorry, if you have a tie and you put a balize on it, and use a crapo, referring to Laventillians as crapo, they will vote for them? Why do you think they say that? Why do you think we will go up to Laventil and say, we know of the government? We know of the government. I'm still on here. We know of the government. And then, of course, to very little people, as he did in Maloney, women in particular, say to them, when they're asking, of course, for some kind of respite, some kind of relief, so some kind of amelioration, he would now say to them, listen, I ain't telling you a man to take, and I don't be in your bedroom. Why do you think he would say that? Why do you think today Gonzalez and they will be saying things like, including, of course, Al-Rari, that we give the present government a year? Why do you think they're saying that? Why do you think they would say that every PNM must be a propagandist? Not just acknowledging that they have been engaged in deception, but have the audacity, the temerity, the gall, the effrontery, and the bold-facedness to encourage others to engage in that highly immoral, unethical, and wrong action. Why do you think? Because they believe that they can engage in that kind of narrative that will cause you to change your mind about the present government, engage, of course, in resistance activities manifested, of course, in protests or whatever it is that they anticipate will emerge, and either short-live the present administration or cause to short-live the present administration, or when they would have completed their 5-year stint, that they could simply waltz into government. I say that that is a sheep in, or put another way, let me put it more appropriately, that is a fox or a wolf in sheep clothing talk. Wolf in sheep clothing. They're all sanctimonious and self-righteous indignation, and they know now and could tell you that landlord tax is the same as property tax, so as to sanitize themselves. That's what that is all about, you know. Sanitize themselves. And then say and go to court to, of course, prove it that they are so concerned about the workers, the ordinary workers in CPEP. So they will have their friend having gotten, of course, the contractor by way of political connection, prepared to make the sacrifice and make a fool of themselves by going to court and following Marcel and, of course, Lala and others. Well, recently, the court decided that they had to pay the cost of CPEP for taking lawyers and going to court in order to prevent the decision of the court or the judge that sat on the matter to give them the opportunity at least to contest, to have a case, to make a case against CPEP. But more importantly, it was about sending the file to the DPP and therefore the police. And as the appeal court said, apart from, of course, telling them that they have to pay cost, Marcel and the contractor that allowed himself to be so used, because I'm sure that they're going to abandon him now, so he have to find the money himself. Lala, them ain't paying nothing. And I'm going to tell you something about Lala sometime if I get the time today, because Andy would have been involved and he would be testifier to that fact. But the point I am making is that the court said, the appeal court said, in no uncertain terms, that you have preempted. You put the cart before the horse. It's a horse to go before the cart. But you put the cart before the horse. There is a provision in the contract, as Anna Ramlogan, that distinguished, of course, a lawyer in Trinidad and Tobago, who they tried to set up incidentally with the not the Malcolm Jones. Malcolm Jones is a different one, but of course the Vincent Nelson matter, where Rowley said that they get a big fish. And in a civil matter, he then say, he made reference to what? He made reference to Pamesa, who became, of course, a state witness. And therefore, he equated a state witness to be that of Vincent Nelson, not telling us, except, of course, some whistleblower in some ministry alerted, of course, the opposition at the time, Kamala Prasad Bisesa and others, as to the real deal and the pernicious and malicious conduct towards the perversion of the course of criminal justice in this country, not just once, because we can refer immediately to Brent Thomas, so let us not go there. Perversion of the course of criminal justice in this country. Rowley was up and down the place saying that they catch a big fish and that Vincent Nelson is, of course, a state witness, is similar and equated to, of course, Pamasa, not telling us that they pay him literally $10 million to give a statement to incriminate Anand Ramlogan and Ramdeen. The information of which came to the attention of the DPP and eventually dismissed the charges that was preferred by willing and accomplished police officers who were prepared to compromise not only their own integrity and the sacredness of the oath of their office. Not only that, but they were prepared to concoct evidence to secure a conviction so that Rowley and they can get the political, what I consider to be potency, the political benefit, the political aggrandizement, so that could be encompassed in part of the what? Of the propaganda, in order to influence the population to say two things. One, that the UNC is corrupt under Kamala Prasad Bissessa. That's one. And that the PNM is the best thing since sliced bread, and that therefore the management and the governance of Trinidad and Tobago should remain by virtue of your votes in the bosom, the toxic bosom of the PNM. That's what that was designed to do. So greedy was he to secure conviction that they bypass fundamental principles of not just evidence, probative evidence, but they fail, of course, to cross their T's and dot their I's in that conspirators attempt to pervert the course of justice. We saw it, of course, in those bogus so-called emails that Rowley presented to, and in my view, he should have been charged for treason and even all now, because those matters of a criminal nature do surrender itself to oblivion. No. Should have been charged. After 3 years, it took for the vindication of the current Prime Minister, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bissessa, and her team of that dastard, evil, wicked, diabolical, unrelentingly devious perpetration of a falsehood and fraud on the people of Trinidad and Tobago, in of all places, the sanctity of the parliament. He did that. He only did that. So I want to tell you in no uncertain terms, there's nothing sacrosanct about these people. There's nothing sacred about them. It's a bunch of opportunistic political parasites, as I've said over and over, that are prepared, of course, to engage in criminal behavior and, of course, to pervert the course of criminal justice in order to make themselves look as though they are sanitized, and in the eyes of the electorate, they must, of course, be given favor. I say no. That must not happen. We have come too far. So let them bump the gum. Let them continue, of course, to blow their trumpets and ping their lapels like an empty vessel, make plenty noise. But we shall be steadfast. We shall be as constant as the northern star. We must be as immutable as I said, can't change. As we move inexorably forward to make certain that Trinidad and Tobago, the population of Trinidad and Tobago, reach that place of deservingness, of relative calm, peace, security, and most importantly, prosperity. As the waste and profligacy, corruption, nepotism, and cronyism, friends and family, members of the party, as they rape the treasury and gourmandize on the treasury of the country, and as typical parasites give nothing back, not even when they are in opposition. You notice that. If they give, as I understand it, that Scotland will be having some Christmas party, and he boasts about how much hampers he has to give. But he would have taken some of his own resources. I don't want to say ill-gotten, but you use your common sense, having regard to what was said earlier. And why? You always have to take what they say with not just a spoonful, but a truckload of salt, if not a whole factory of salt. All of that is designed to keep the electorate in the respective constituencies in BAP. Yeah, in BAP, meaning continue to be brainwashed into believing that somehow they care for them. And at the same time, put into train their march towards the obviously elusive capturing of government again. I said take it, eat it, but never to vote for them. And I'm glad that you in Tobago recognize what we were saying all the time, and you did not attend as we indicated when the announcement was made by this dishonorable individual called Rowley, now an ordinary citizen with no influence, that you did not attend. And the very fact that you did not attend send a message as to the extent to which people would have seen him and would project onto him their anathema or their hatred for the worst prime minister, the most hated prime minister, and arguably the most hated person in Trinidad and Tobago. What's the time? Of course, Andy clearly will not be coming on. All right. So we have 30 minutes again. Unfortunately, I'm unable to, of course, take calls. So I will have to, of course, continue the monologue. But I'm not soliloquizing, meaning that I'm not talking to myself. I know I'm talking to millions of people out there. And so it is important that we started this trend of discussion using several intermingling and possibly a tapestry or a cobweb or a web of examples to show why it's, of course, making the point of how dangerous the PNM and those who believe in that obsolete, that Jurassic, that unworthy, that pernicious, that deceptive, entity that has morphed into a criminal enterprise called the PNM. Criminal enterprise. There's ample evidence that you know and have been, of course, extrapolated in in that discourse, but in this projection, in this narrative to you. Enough, of course, to make certain that when you would have completed at the end of this session, 9 o'clock, that you go and have enough to think, enough material to think, and to think wise, especially those who are still in a state of what I consider to be abject denial. It has to be absolute denial. And of course, are not accepting the fact of who and what the PNM is. And those who have nestled themselves, who have hitched themselves to that, what I consider to be poison chalice or poison chariot. Yes, indeed. Let us not for one moment believe that they right now are not thinking of how they will counter what you would have heard today for probably the first time on the ground report. But these discussions, I say these discussions from the point of view, I expect that the elements and the components and the variables that would have been projected, that you see them as points of discussion among your family. But first, doing some self-introspection. Talk to yourself. Don't believe that everybody is mad when they're talking to themselves, because it is said that if you're talking to yourself, it's fine. But if you answer back after you ask yourself a question, then of course we know that there's something more. But I am saying that if it is conscious, if it is done consciously, then you cannot be mad, because you're looking for solutions. And then of course your immediate family, friends, acquaintances, and then of course the wider society, people who you would not normally be fraternizing with or interacting with. And those things come about in educational circumstance, where you go to school and you get back home, work, go to work and get back home, functions, whether for recreation or otherwise. You go to the beach, you meet new people, but you come back. But I say that these discussions, one to another, must be so engaged. So we have a like-mindedness and a oneness of purpose that says that Trinidad and Tobago can do much better. We must do better. And do not fall for what, of course, is commonly called the situation where you dig a hole, as the PNM have done, and hoping that somebody else will fall in it. And they have turned out that they dug it for themselves. To put more meat or more perspective to it, then of course the old saying, the very sagacious saying, the very, what I consider to be conscientious saying, oh, what a tangle web we weave when we first set out to the sea. Let me repeat. It can be ascribed to, and indeed I'm saying, it has been the ethos, it has been the idiosyncrasism of the PNM. And therefore, it's worth repeating, oh, what a tangle web we weave when we first set out to the sea. And we saw it, of course, with Manning, Patrick Manning, the late I'm talking about. The present one, of course, is a big joker, horizontally challenged. Yeah, horizontally challenged, you know, like how Imsbert was told he was vertically challenged. Well, Brian Manning is horizontally challenged. Vertically challenged means, of course, Imbert has short man syndrome. So speaks loud, pretends, generate non-serious discussion, pretend that he knows it all, he's omniscient, and then of course the part maybe recuse himself, or recluse himself, not recuse, but recluse himself, put himself away and then smile and say, I did well, probably looking in the mirror and patting himself on the shoulder. Well, of course, Manning is said to be horizontally challenged, meaning that he's obese. That's what it means. But the fact of the matter is that we have traveled a road from 2015, and the terminus of which was on the 28th of April, the end of it, that road ended there, and you're hearing a breath of fresh air, verbal and practical, being projected. Yesterday, we had, of course, the conclusion of the firecrackers and that type of noisy playthings, some people say, fireworks, chiropractor. Sorry if I pronounce the term wrongly, but chiropractor or something like that is the term. But the fact is that it is not just that. The Children's Life Fund, the Children's Hospital, the focusing on tax revenue to do the things that are required for the maintenance and management of the country in areas that one will have to think deep, or more significantly, has the dual purpose of behavioral change. And if not, then of course you continue, but at a higher price. So whether it be syntax such as cigarettes, such as alcohol, etc., but at the same time, notice, while of course the barmen and so on are complaining, but I want to say that the government is smart enough to know, like me, that the demand for these items is inelastic. Same amount of businesses, etc., same people buy every time, no matter how high the price is. Yes, if not more. So why not go there and look for taxes, as opposed to giving a property tax where everybody has to pay and they're catching the ant and then without jobs, etc., or more worse, losing their jobs. We have seen, of course, with Petrotrin and the policy of this government, this government here, meaning the PNM government. We have seen that. In such circumstance. And of course, the present government would have inherited such a situation, and therefore it will take time in order, of course, to remedy it. And of course, they have already demonstrated a willingness and a commitment and a dedication by, of course, making certain that 20,000 jobs that would have been ordinarily not be available under the last administration, and totally in their control to open up. Well, the present government made it available, 20,000 of them. A shortfall of personnel for the administration and the proper workings of the government by way of the various institutions that are supposed to function smoothly in order, of course, to deliver to the people and for us to have a better quality of life and standard of living. Yeah. But the PNM, none of it. They seize that. They talk about, of course, fiscal consolidation. That's what Wimbledon was saying, but never was able, of course, to eliminate the deficit that arguably, of course, they inherited, yes, and had to continue, even though they were claiming that that approach will eliminate the deficit. Well, that and a pink donkey we are yet to see. Yeah? So it is important that we understand these issues and don't get carried away with the shenanigans and the hyperboles and the cacophonous babblings and the ambulatory verbalizations of Rowley, a dead politician, and those who are half dead, Imsworth and the bunch, including Penelope Beckles. And let me use, of course, an oxymoron. They are yet to resurrect themselves, even though they are only half dead. Because you associate resurrection with what? With a person or something that would have died. But I'm saying that they're attempting with their half-dead self to resurrect themselves. I'm saying, in other words, that they are pretty much alive and will be lurking in every corner and seeking every opportunity to malign the government, to disfigure negatively its forward movement, projection, and thrust in the interest of all of us. They will be doing that. We have seen it. So you look for it. So what you do, you look for it. And then you say, look at them, and you laugh. Comic relief. You must be engaging of necessity. Comic relief. Comic relief, people. That is what they are. That is what you have to see them for. And as I said, the people like Andy, Mikey, and myself will continue. Listen, it is not by accident you have Real Media TT where this broadcast is being projected to the international audience and domestic and regional audience, you know. It's not by accident. It is not by accident. Mikey would have been the author and the programmer and the content creator of The Observer, you know. It is neither by accident the corridor transformation was created by yours truly, you know. Was not by accident. It was as a consequence of furthering our commitment to national development, advancement, transparency, accountability in government, and to make certain that the device of the opponents of democracy are viewed conspicuously and are laid bare, as we have done today, yesterday, the day before, in St. Vincent, in Tobago, and into the future. That is the reason. Why would there be any other reason? It is a cost. I think Mikey made the greatest investments when this idea came up. Of course, started by Andy. And I'll give you the background. Today is about, of course, a catharsis, a purging, to let you know why it is you must stay the course. Why it is there are people that are prepared to make the sacrifice and have made the sacrifice. And why it is that you are listening and hearing me right now as I speak. You need to know, and don't take it slightly. And while comparatively speaking, there are those who would have millions of dollars probably in the bank, hundreds of thousands in the bank, As opposed to us, that of course, if it was a business, you will call it a bootstrap operation. You will say living from hand to mouth. You can even describe it as living from paycheck to paycheck. That is the reality. But yet still, here it is, we have been able, by way of our like-mindedness, of commitment and dedication to our democratic processes and principles, and to make certain that none of it is eroded, or put another way, eliminate or reduce the erosion that are being attempted by those anti-democratic elements among us purporting to be Democrats. Because when you talk democracy, you are also talking about equity. You're talking about freedom of speech. You are, of course, subject to the rights of others to speak and to travel and to move around, consistent with our constitution and what the courts from time to time will adjudicate upon to make sure that that fundamental remains. But there are those who are prepared to use government, as we have seen with the PNM. When Rowley went to intercept that shortlist for Commissioner of Police, and by wielding his executive influence on the president, who seemed to, from the evidence we have agreed, and then of course the chairman then, Miss Bliss Sipasad, I suppose it was not as blissful as she thought it would have been, because I'm sure that she is in a state of maybe perpetual regretfulness. But nonetheless, it generated the collapse of the Police Service Commission. Well, that was interference in our democracy. Yeah, because the Constitution says that these institutions are supposed to be insulated from political interference and influence. And Rowley went there and began a process that had a chain reaction that damaged ultimately our credibility as a nation. Because all the world would know, or the other democracies would have known, that you had a prime minister and a government that is prepared to honor. And don't tell me you don't understand what I'm talking about, because I could bring to you, of course, the preempting of the local government elections that eventually was, of course, conducted last. I could tell you that. I could also tell you about, of course, the interference with the democratic process by going to parliament with a tenuous or a very slim majority and say put 3 additional seats to the 12 that was there. That is quintessential. That is the epitome of democratic interference and subversion. Yeah. So don't tell me I don't know. Don't tell me, well, you could tell me you didn't remember. Now that I told you, I'm sure that you will never forget. That is what it is. And how could we take a chance? Now, that does not mean that we will allow the present government to engage in activities of a similar nature and remain silent, you know. No, it cannot be. It cannot be one rule for one and a different rule for the other. As far as our principle and projections are concerned, and seeing the blatant infringement of our democratic principles and way of life, and values, condemn it, advocate for a group that is supposed to not just rebuild, but to sustain it. And as I think it was Ronald Reagan who said that democracy is not just the requirement of the population that is operating under that system. It's not only eternal vigilance, but it is a responsibility of successive generations to ensure that the principle of eternal vigilance continues from generation to generation, and in this case, into the future, when you and I would have made our mark and left this society. I'm still on air. I'm still on air. I just have about, what's the time now? Wait now. Wait, don't take over. All right. I just have about 1 more minute. So call me in 2 minutes' time. Yes, indeed. We have one more minute on the program. Well, of course, clearly, Andy would have been unavoidably absent, and of course, as we do it, somebody has to take charge. I have things to do as well, promptly from 9 o'clock. But I push back, having regard to what I know, I push back my appointment to a little later. So I'm saturated, overwhelmed with, of course, appointments. But this is more important because it is about opinion influencing. And the PNM, if we allow them one modicum, 1 inch, 1 minute, 1 second, they will utilize that to counteract all of what was said today on this program. So we cannot afford, knowing what the enemy is capable of, to miss one program. We have missed, of course, unavoidably so, and that would have been due to circumstances beyond our control, collectively and individually. But like today, you didn't expect that we will have no program today, so we had to have a program today. Had to. And the point I'm making about our democracy to close, I think we have reached 9 o'clock. Yes, it is exactly 9 o'clock. Well, democracy, I think all of us will know by now, is government by the people. Yes, by the people. The people see about their affairs of the people, that they participate in the governmental process and become ministers and prime ministers, etc., in our context, and for the people. And all of that, in other words, is designed for the improvement of the people, for the advancement of the people. And when Rowley and they came and reversed that by saying it is only for their personal advancement and the PNM advancement, and they will always prevail, and they will, of course, start in 2015 with no money, below the red line in terms of the bank account, empty bank account, no money, and at the same time owing over $5 million. That is what Rowley told us. And then in 9 about short years, they set about to construct an edifice. A building 5 stories high, with the average, of course, a cost of about $100 million. Where the hell they get the money from? You start off with nothing. Right now, I'm dealing with a case. I don't go and deal with the people as a finisher. I'm dealing with a case right now. I'm not going to call any names, but it's people that I am fond of and respect, African family, who many years built this business. I believe in that they would have gotten a helping hand. The helper decides to mortgage their building. They getting a minuscule part of it. I could tell you the figures. Let me tell you the figures. They were owing $400,000 to a bank. So the bank had told them, well, listen, you need to firm up, and you need, of course, to pay your installments. That's all we want is $400,000. They were able to, someone came to them and said, listen, I could pay off the whole $400,000 for you, but I will amalgamate it with a loan, consolidate it with a loan that I want for myself. You know what I say? I'm talking here to you potential business people as well, who small and want to, of course, see persons who are willing to give a helping hand. You have to be very astute. So he wants a loan for himself. He's prepared, of course, to put up another property, his own property, that person who came to help out the person with the $400,000 loan that they got and is unable to service. So he, in that process, took a $3 million loan. You know what I'm saying? Utilizing the property that was owing only $400 million. Yes, the bank portion of the total amount, and guess what? The entire thing ran into arrears of over $700,000. And today it is now $4 million and counting dollars. Yeah. So the one with the 400 who got nothing more, and the one with the 3 million who got the lion's share, is not prepared to cut at the umbilical cord or at the waist as a Siamese twin, and to let this fella loose with the only 400 so that we can find ways to treat with him. He wants the institution to take everything, property, all the properties, if of course they fail to pay. I don't talk. And that is the complexity of the issue that I am attending to. Very, 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 but there are ways and means of getting rid of things. So I'm just showing you, be careful, business people. That being said, of course, Andy, as I said, will be on tomorrow morning. Of course, don't forget tonight, the corridor transformation from 8 o'clock. And of course, we will continue with these and other programs. Boy, people just call me. You notice that it's 9 o'clock, people. And of course, don't forget, of course, tonight I will be mentioning it. Of course, our hamper drive. Our hamper drive. People know it's 9 o'clock, right? So let me call them up tonight. So don't vex with them. But I'm saying that, of course, our hamper drive continues. Of course, we thank all of those who would have made financial and other institutions as well as individuals. And of course, we thank, yes, Miss Labre, yes, we coming to collect. I hope this time I lost my other car now because I lost my SUV because, of course, of going to collect food stuff around and close to Christmas time. So I'm not going to champion that. Of course, the number to call Annie at 3366594. 3366594. 94. And of course, if you prefer, you can call me at the normal number that you know me at, 337-6940. Have a wonderful rest of the day. God bless and see you. Of course, Andy, I know that you're somewhere in the background, and of course, the technical people. Well, we are out of here. Bye-bye. I have no music to play, so we have to do it raw and dry.